Questions for oral answer. Question number 1, in the name of Dr. Jian.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, how will Budget 2016 support further growth in jobs and wages while maintaining the government's fiscal management?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the budget will be on the 26th of May. It will continue the government's record of fiscal discipline, which focuses on getting better results from spending and managing long-term spending pressures. As a result of that, so far, expenditure has fallen from 34% of GDP in 2011, where it peaked, to 30% in 2015. We're committed to achieving debt of around 20% of GDP by 2020. As we said in the budget policy statement, with the budget now broadly in balance, the government will not distinguish between forecasts of small negative and small positive balances.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
What is the fastest growing item of expenditure over the next 5 years according to the budget policy statement?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, that is likely to be national superannuation, which is rising at around $700 to $800 million per year. Alongside that, the government only spends about another $1 billion per year on everything else.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Jian.
What recent steps has the government taken to support growth, delivering more jobs and higher wages for New Zealand households?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, the most recent and one of the largest steps the government has taken is to sign the TPPA. This gives equal and fair access for New Zealand exporters to 800 million customers in 11 countries, which account for 36% of the global economy, including the world's biggest economy, the United States. It also means that other countries are bound under that agreement by rules that help protect access of New Zealand exporters to overseas markets. So it is, the TPPA is important to jobs and incomes in New Zealand. The alternative of not participating would certainly be bad for New Zealand households.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Jian.
What is the outlook for economic growth over the next 4 years, and how will this growth deliver more jobs for New Zealand households and families?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, after a relatively soft first half of 2015, recent data suggests New Zealand economy picked up somewhat in the second half of last year, and the outlook is for continuing moderate growth. The most recent forecasts have expect GDP to grow around 2.7% per year each year through to 2020. And what this means in terms of jobs and incomes is that there will be a further 173,000 additional jobs on top of the 175,000 jobs added in the last 3 years.
Supplementary question, Dr. Jian.
What are some risks to the economic outlook?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's fair to say that 2016 has started with certainly a perception of greater risk in the global economy. And factors making up that would be the weak commodity prices, slower growth in China driven by lower investment, even though China's consumption aspect of its economy is growing pretty strongly. There's uncertainty around the impact of US interest rates, and there appears to be some growing risks around European banks. We will continue to focus on New Zealand's resilience to any of these changes.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is ASB Chief Economist Nick Tuffley correct when he says, quote, on a per capita basis there has essentially been no growth over the past year?
That's right. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, he may not be correct. Depends how you measure growth over the last year. But it's not surprising. It's not surprising that in a growing economy where more and more people are turning up to enjoy the benefits of one of the faster growing developed economies, that we may get periods where per capita growth is a bit slower, but overall, Treasury analysis shows per capita growth has averaged about 1.2% per year if you exclude the Canterbury earthquake.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speak to the Minister of Finance. What is New Zealand's unemployment rate, and has he seen any predictions of the unemployment rate going to 7%?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the most recent unemployment number was, I think, 5.3%, which was somewhat below the Labor Party finance spokesman's forecast, which, as usual, is based on his wishful thinking that everything will go bad suddenly. And he forecast 7%.
Well, it has with his career.
Question, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Has the Minister of Finance seen the forecast from the Treasury of unemployment reaching 6.5% in 2016 and possibly reaching 7% in 2017?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, you've always got to be a bit careful with quarter-to-quarter numbers. But Treasury, turns out Treasury were wrong, but it's pretty hard to be wronger than the opposition finance spokesman.
Order. 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 James Shaw, question number 2.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to